Welcome everyone to Caleb Watches Movies, the channel where I, Caleb, randomly select from one of the many movies that I own and I watch and review them for you, unlike days like today where I'm taking a certain franchise or a certain topic and I am ranking the crap out of it. And it's the end of 2024. I can't believe this year is already done. It felt like it was just getting started. At the beginning of 2024, I had COVID and the flu almost at the exact same time. It was a shitty start to the year for me. To go from that, and it just felt like this year was just a whirlwind. I don't know where the time went at all because it's already over. But a big chunk of my time this year went to watching as many films that were released in 2024 as I could, so that when I got to the end of the year and I did my top 10 worst and top 10 best films that I watched this year, I actually had a large pool to choose from. So those commenters out there that are like, "Oh, Caleb, you just like superhero films. That's all you watch. You're such an idiot. I'm not gonna watch your stuff ever again. How can you be diverse at all when all you do is watch superhero and action movies?" Rest assured, I have watched over 130 films that have been released in 2024, which is a freaking lot. My goal this year was to watch 2 brand new movies a week. I believe that came out to like 104, 105 films for the year, and I far exceeded that. I made my stretch goal. I'm going to try my best to do the exact same thing in 2025. Here's hoping that I can hold out and that I have time and that this mental capacity that I have can hold on to it. But I have watched a lot of movies that have come out this year, so I feel that this top 10 best of 2024 list, I feel, is pretty diverse, and I have a good pooling to sample from when it comes to figuring out what is best and what is bad. Now, the last video that I released was the top 10 worst films that I found throughout the year. Of course, no one sets out to make a bad movie, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So we've already covered the negative of 2024. Here, we are talking about the absolute best, the top 10 movies that touched me emotionally and intellectually and have stuck with me ever since that I've watched them. I thought I had this list set a couple of months ago, but then a couple of releases and things that I've forgotten about and finally got around to watching. I finally got to watching it, and it blew up my entire list, so here we are. I am very confident that this is the definitive top 10 best films that were released in 2024, according to myself, of course. I'm going to try to remember to do an honorable mentions. I keep meaning to do honorable mentions, but I get so wrapped up in the ranking and the numbering that I completely forget, but I'm going to try to talk about some honorable mentions, because there are some movies in here that I really wanted to put on my top 10. I just couldn't though, but they are worth giving a short little shout out at the end of this video. So enough of me blabbering, I say we get into it. This is my top 10 best films of 2024, starting, of course, numerically at number 10. At number 10 for me, of course, is the most recent released movie on this entire list, and it's the movie that everyone is talking about. It came out at the end of November. People have been talking about this IP ever since 2003 when it was a Broadway musical, and I went to the theater department and every girl in there was singing all of the songs from this musical. And some of them should not have been singing them because, one, it's Idina Menzel and she's not teaching you properly how to sing, and you're just mimicking her, and it's annoying. 2, you just can't carry a tune, so just stop. But of course, I'm talking about Wicked, which I know a lot of people out there didn't realize that it was a part 1, but it's Wicked Part 1. We are getting Part 2 next year, and I have a suspicious feeling that Part 2 is probably going to make it somewhere on my top 10 for next year as well. But this movie is quite special. I was thinking that I wasn't going to like it as much. Casting someone as Ariana Grande in the Kristen Chenoweth role as Glinda, like that confused me. But then seeing the promotional material and listening to the sound bits of her leading up to the release of this movie, I'm going, okay, she sounds incredible. Cynthia Erivo, I thought her tone and her coloring of her voice was a little too warm for the role of Elphaba and the Wicked Witch. I always think of the Wicked Witch having this more pointed sound, like an Idina Menzel. It's very pointed. It cuts through a lot of things. But that's the whole point of the story of Wicked, right? It's about starting rumors and starting gossip about this person who is standing up in the face of authority. And because she's not going along with the system or going along with the people in power and what they want her to do, we're going to label her as wicked. We are going to denounce her as much as possible to diminish her entire credibility. It's an incredibly powerful story and a powerful message that needs to be heard of today. And plus the performances are just magnificent. Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande I didn't think it would work, but they sound just beautiful and gorgeous with each other. The whole defying gravity bit at the end, of course, this is part one, so it's just Act 1, and Act 1 ends with that big show-stopping number, and now we are in the middle of the longest intermission in the history of Broadway. But there is a moment during the Ozdos ballroom scene where Glinda and Elphaba have their little awkward, weird dance, but there's this moment where Glinda just touches Elphaba's face, and me realizing that that's probably the first time that she's felt the warmth of human touch, probably her entire life, ever since her mother passed away, actually. She's been raised by animals, her father hates her guts because she's green, it's the color of her skin, but here's Glinda, who's been a frickin' bitch the entire time, up until this point, whispering that it's okay and just barely brushing her cheek and her tears away. It gets me going just thinking about it, and that's going to go down, I guarantee you, one of my favorite scenes in the history of movies. Personally, when we get to that ranking somewhere down the road, I don't know when that's going to be, but that scene will definitely make it on there. Wicked, like I said, is a special movie that I think everyone in the world has seen, and if you haven't seen it, even if you're not into musicals, I definitely recommend it. It's a powerful story. At number 9 is probably a weird choice to a lot of you out there, but just thinking about the movie-going experience that I had with my wife, going to see this movie about a cat who finds two humans who take care of him, and it's in the middle of this, not zombie apocalypse, but alien invasion of these creatures and monsters who hear super well. Just an uplifting pet story. Of course, I'm talking about A Quiet Place Day One. The advertising of the Quiet Place films always build them up as these big monster movies, but it's really anything but that. This is not a scary film. Yes, there are jump scares here and there, but this is just a film about human connection. Human connections between humans, humans connecting with animals, aka this adorable cat who just saves the day and is obviously our protagonist and our main character and goes through the biggest change of the entire movie. I just remember having a lot of fun sitting there with my wife. We had recently adopted a brand new cat this year that is also a tuxedo cat. She's more black than white. The cat is more white than black, but you know, semantics. They're all adorable. And it was just a beautiful story, and seeing these connections unfold with each other. Lupita Nyong'o and Joseph Quinn had tremendous chemistry just through body language and not being able to talk with each other. I mean, that's just powerful. Any movie where there's just no talking and there's very scarce dialogue throughout the entire thing, but manages to convey emotion and connect with me on a personal level, it's a triumph, which is why I put this above Wicked, which is why I put it at number 9. I just had a lot of fun watching this. And speaking of connection, who can't connect with this adorable little, beautiful little London English bear by the name of Paddington, who is hanging out in Peru in this movie? At number 8, of course, it's Paddington in Peru. I got to see a screening of this movie early here in the United States. It's already been released in the UK. The US officially doesn't get the US release until mid-January or the end of January, so, I don't know. Kind of feel pretty cool about that. But it's Paddington, who is this adorable, lovable bear that just makes your life better whenever you have him in your life. So the fact that it's just a movie about Paddington makes it in the top 10 for me. People praise the first Paddington movie, and of course they praise Paddington 2 as one of the greatest movies of all time, impacts emotionally and everything, and I'm not taking away from that. I think that is a lot of clout for this movie to live up to, so people may be a little disappointed in that this movie is not as good or better than Paddington 2, but it doesn't have to be. All I need is a nice, good, emotional story that connects with me here, and Paddington in Peru did that for me. I think it lost a little bit of the emotional impact because the Sally Hawkins character is replaced because she didn't want to return for some stupid reason, but we still have moments that tug at your heartstrings in here when it comes to family, Paddington finding where he comes from and finding his tribe, but then making the choice, okay, well, what tribe do I go with? Do I go who I'm descendant from, or do I go with who I've been living with the past couple of years? Paddington in Peru made me feel so joyful and so happy. Of course, it's Paddington. He's going to make it in my top 10. There's just no question. It's an automatic. At number 7 is definitely the best superhero film that came out this year, mainly because the big Marvel DC brands took a step back this year and reduced a lot of what they were producing because they're like, hey, things aren't working out. We kind of have to rebrand, figure out where we're going, and condense what we're doing here, okay? But we have this awesome movie called Deadpool and Wolverine that we know is going to be a smash hit, so that's going to be the only one we're putting out this year. And you know what? It's frickin' worth it. Deadpool finally joins the MCU, and hell, Logan, Hugh Jackman finally enters the MCU after really starting this whole superhero craze that started in 2000 with X-Men. He's been playing this role for 24 fucking years, and he has killed it in every single one that he's been in. So it's really just a triumph that this film exists. But then the story that we get here and the character relationship between Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman, Logan and Wade Wilson just coming together, you just see how much of a friendship they have with each other and how much they love each other as friends. And I always love seeing that. I love seeing a great human connection like that. That doesn't have to be, you know, sexual in any nature. Like, no, you can just love someone just for being a friend. And my God, just the chemistry and the love that they have on screen, it shows. And the love that they have for these characters shows. Plus, it's a freaking hilarious movie. Ryan Reynolds is amazing at comedy, and then here's Hugh Jackman, who is pretty funny in his own right, but he's more of the straight man. He is the guy who, if he is going to be funny, it's through wit, it's through facial reactions, it's not through the dialogue like a Wade Wilson will do. Plus, the opening sequence of Deadpool Wolverine, Bye Bye Bye, is one of the best opening sequences, I think, in the history of movies. Definitely the MCU, by far. And everyone talks about, like, the love that NSYNC and Bye 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 got for this movie, but for me, being a Goo Goo Dolls fan and hearing Iris played twice in this frickin' movie, especially at the climax when we had that big reveal, oh, that just made me feel good. Like, yeah, Goo Goo Dolls. It's like the one band that I know and that I follow, so yeah, they made it into a Marvel movie. I feel cool. At number 6 is one of the best documentaries that I have seen, and I actually took time out of my schedule and my wife's schedule for us to actually go see a special screening of this before they thought that it was going to have a wide release and before it was going to come to Max, because I wanted to see this. I wanted to see the story of Christopher Reeve and what happened and how he just touched everyone's lives as Superman. Of course, this is, at number 6, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. And it talks about his entire life from when he was in college and he was a struggling actor to when he landed probably the biggest role that you could possibly land in this character called Superman and changed the whole film industry and made people believe that a man can fly. But then after all the Superman movies come out, things are slowing down for his acting career, and then a terrible tragedy happens to him where he loses the ability to move, basically, and to live and breathe on his own. He needs to have a machine to help him do that. And we talk about in the superhero world how the Superman symbol, the S, it stands for hope. But really when you see a courageous action like that, where someone is cut down to basically a bare shell of himself, instead of him wanting it to all end and to end it, he decides to carry on for his wife, for his family, for his children, who are really the true heroes of the movie. But he decides to carry on, and I can't think of anything that's more hopeful than that, when you have the shittiest hand dealt to you, and yet you still want to be here. And part of the reason of that is his wife, who also had a terrible tragedy after, through this film, and we get to the moment where Christopher Reeve passes away. She passes away 6 months later due to lung cancer, and she's never smoked a cigarette or done anything like that in her entire life. Like I said, the kids are the heroes of this story because they carry on his legacy. They carry on this hopefulness in doing charity donations and fundraisers to help build up this foundation to help people walk again. It is inspiring. It's one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. There are parts that are going to make you cry. I was actually waiting for it. It wasn't hitting me emotionally for a while, and I was surprised. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to make it through this without really feeling connected to it. And then there are some scenes in here, especially when Robin Williams comes on screen and is emoting because his friend just passed away, and then his wife comes on. Like, yeah, that got me. That fucking got me. When you hit me here and here, like I've been saying all review, it's going to make it into the top 10. Superman, Christopher Reeve story is a triumph, and just love that it's under the DC Studios brand. It's a great way to start a whole studio. At number 5, I am putting a movie that I am late to the game on. I think this film came out in September, maybe late August, I'm thinking, and just got around to watching it this month. And like, this is the one that blew it up because I love Saturday Night Live, especially growing up and developing my extroversion, I guess, and trying to be, the class clown, the comedian. I would pull from Saturday Night Live all the time. So to see how the show got started in a, what, they cover like 3-4 hour time period, it was incredible. And I love the pacing of Saturday Night. Of course, that's the movie that we're covering. Everything is all fast and quick, and there are seldom moments where we stop and we breathe and we take moments where we have to figure out, okay, where is this story going? We have a lot of tracking shots in here that's very impressive. How it's handling all of these different big time celebrity personalities was incredible. This is the best Chevy Chase impersonation that I have ever seen, and that we will probably ever see. Like, oh my god, there were moments I'm like, oh my god, this is a young Chevy Chase. Holy shit, how did we do this? Seeing Andy Kaufman's performance and Jim Henson's performance in here, it's all great. If you are a lover of comedy like I am, and a lover of this show, it goes through ups and downs, of course, now, but in its golden age, you had these hilarious people who were able to make everyone laugh just from the moment they step out on stage. Every single actor in here captured every personality. The pacing is great again. The script, I think, is fantastic. Of course, you sit back and you think, okay, not all of this definitely happened that night. They are embellishing a lot of things, but you know what? It's great to see it all combine, and it's proof that the show always kind of works out in any type of theater performance or live performance. It's crazy. It is hectic. Sometimes you're a part of a performance that shouldn't do well, but somehow it always does. Everything kind of works out in the end, and the performance is just fine. At number 4 is more proof that John Green just knows how to speak to that little tiny teenage girl inside of every one of us. This is Turtles All the Way Down. Saw this early on in the year, and it stayed in my top 5, really, all throughout the year. The subject matter of this teenage girl trying to live her life, but she's also dealing with severe OCD, but is also trying to date boys and hang out with her friend and go on adventures and take risks of going to colleges and speaking with authors and professors who she looks up to. And to see her triumph and overcome her, I guess not overcome her OCD, but definitely learn how to work through it. This whole subject matter just hits home to me. I'm very close to someone who has been diagnosed with OCD. OCD is part of my life. I don't have it, and this is not like it's a TikTok diagnosis, all those TikTok videos out there like, oh, my OCD, or I definitely have OCD, but it's not clinically proven for yourself. It's so annoying. When it is actually labeled by a psychiatrist or a doctor, it does impact your life. It's impacted my life, and to see this girl really just be okay in the end while still having this condition, but is able to, like I said, go on adventures with her friend and go thrill seeking and go on detective or makeshift detective stories. It's inspiring. And even though the subject really hits close to home for me, it's still an amazing movie that hit me emotionally, and I absolutely loved it. I love our two leads. Their friendship with each other, I think, is fantastic. This movie is just fantastic. It hits you in the feels, and it just makes you feel good at the end of the day. And number 3 is probably one of those movies that the majority of people will probably label as Oscar baity. Like, obviously, this is going to be baiting for an Oscar, especially for the performances and maybe Best Picture. But just sitting back and allowing yourself to just relax and watch these two people love each other and go through a life with each other hilariously and through the rough moments, it's a privilege. And this is a movie called We Live in Time at number 3. A young couple falling in love. It's told in a non-linear structure, so there are moments where we see their first kiss, but then we quickly flash forward and it's their 1000th kiss. It's just one of those naturalistic stories that you just learn to appreciate, because not every life is the same, and it's just proof that life is not written. There's no set way to go through life and how to live a life. Do people out there gain success, and do they gain fame and fortune? Sure they do. But there are also people who also get diagnosed with cancer, or have a loved one that gets diagnosed with cancer, or has something terrible happen in their lives that totally derails their plans and their visions of things, and they have to go down this route. Learning that there is not a set path, and seeing these characters learn that there is not a set path and a set way of doing things in a life, it fills me with hope. Is it sad? Absolutely. But there's also joy in that sadness. There is also happiness in that sadness. And around this time when this movie came out, Andrew Garfield did go on Sesame Street and had that nice little sit down with Elmo, and he talked about how his mother had just passed away. And he talked about how, yes, it's very sad to think about, but it's also a great time to think about all the happiness and all the joyful times that he had with his mother. And to realize that just being alive, just being here, just existing is a privilege in itself, and I think that's so powerful. Plus, the advertising for this movie is frickin' amazing. That merry-go-round golden horse that popped up in some of those posters is just tremendous. It's the only reason why this movie was actually popular, and people knew about it, I think. But we live in time. It was a privilege to watch this movie, just as it's a privilege to be here and review them for you watching this video. At number 2 is, in my opinion, by far the best animated feature of this year. If you haven't seen this movie, you're doing yourself a disservice. At number 2, I am putting The Wild Robot. Oh my god, you want something that will just tug at your heartstrings. Watch this adorable robot land on this planet and, through some accidents, finds themselves nurturing and parenting a young duckling, figuring out how to make them grow up fast and be able to soar and be able to fly and be able to live on their own, and also help the fellow community of animals, foxes, moose, bears, birds, skunks, possums. This is such a powerful movie, and I'm so glad that it did so well in the box office. Sometimes these animated features, if you don't have a name like Disney behind them, they don't do so well, but I'm so glad this one did. This is like Iron Giant level animation and storytelling, in my opinion. This is like a sleeper hit that once you watch you go, oh my god, this is the most emotional thing I have ever seen. And how fitting is this story that's about an AI, an artificial intelligence, learning how to live and to cope and to adapt in a naturalistic world of organic-based life forms. Something that may or may not be happening in today's world, in today's society, you know? Kind of. The Wild Robot is wonderful. I can't think of a single thing that is wrong with this movie. Check it out if you haven't seen it, and then after you check it out, watch it again and again and again. The message here is very important and very inspiring. Now, before I get to my number 1, I'm going to cover a couple of honorable mentions. Yes, I remembered to do it. I was kind of in the zone, but I remembered to do it here. There are some movies that I wanted to put on this top 10 list, but I just couldn't. These other ones that I've talked about just hit me a little bit more emotionally than these ones do. But I definitely got to talk about Alien Romulus, which was amazing. I'm not a big fan of the Alien franchise, but after watching this one, I'm like, okay, this one is getting to me. And I thought this was going to be a standard Alien film, but turned out to just exceed my expectations in every department. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. You talk about an ensemble film with a tremendous ensemble and great heists and action scenes. It did terribly at the box office. No one knew about it, but you know what? I got to watch it, and like I said, this ensemble is wonderful. You definitely need to give this a watch. You also need to check out Babes, which is probably the funniest or one of the funniest movies of the year. These two best friends, one already has a kid and the other one has a one-night stand, and turns out that that person dies the next day and leaves a nice little present inside of her womb for the next 9 months. But she is hilarious in her retorts and all of the things that she's talking about with her pregnancy with her best friend. I was laughing so much during this movie I didn't expect to. Definitely check out Babes. Shout out to a Korean film called Hijack 1971. I'm a sucker for any plane hijack or plane disaster movies, and this was a tremendous one from Korean cinema, which I'm also in love with. And I'm also going to give a shout out to a nice body horror film called It's What's Inside, a movie where this young college genius develops a game where everyone who holds on to the thing or the electrodes is able to switch consciousnesses with other people connected in the circle. So you had this group of college students switching bodies, brainwaves with each other. But then things start going awry, people start messing up and pretending that they're not in other people's bodies when they really are. And it's a great metaphor for just like mental and physical assault and what it means to consent to certain things. This is a smart film. All the movies that I've talked about previously are tremendous, and you all should go out of your way to watch every single one of them, but you should absolutely check out my number one, my favorite movie that came out this year, a small, little independent film that really no one watched, but for those of us that did, and are theater nerds, and love Shakespeare, and love the impact that Shakespeare has, and the impact that theater has on just the normal, average, everyday person's life, this movie meant a lot to me, and it's a movie called Ghostlight. A story about a middle-aged construction worker who's never set foot in a theater in his entire life, has no idea what Shakespeare is, has no idea what Romeo and Juliet is. But he's recently gone through a tragedy, his entire family's gone through a tragedy, but he is that stereotypical man who doesn't allow vulnerability into his life, he doesn't open up to his wife at all, he doesn't show any interest in his daughter at all. But after stumbling into a theater, after being laid off, and just kind of hanging out and kind of being shuffled into, hey, why don't you just have a little fun with us? And hey, we're doing a read through of Romeo and Juliet. Why don't you just read like this tiny dinky little part, to eventually playing the part of Romeo. Now, in my opinion, Shakespeare is universal. It doesn't know time, it doesn't know age. So the fact that we have these middle-aged people playing Romeo and Juliet, I think was more impactful for me, because I've seen Romeo and Juliet so many times where it's played by young actors and actresses that haven't had life happen to them yet. I think seeing two middle-aged people play the part of two teenagers falling madly in love with each other to the point where they would end their lives if they can't be together, I think that is so unique and is so special and so much more powerful than seeing two young people do it, in my opinion. But when I used to teach theater, I would talk about how impactful it can be to someone when it helps you establish a narrative for something going on in your life, whether it's big, whether it's small, whether it's happy, whether it's sad. Theater can help you express yourself, whether you're on stage doing it or whether you're just in the audience sitting and watching. And to see this middle-aged man open up and realize that, and when you see that theater bug, that theater switch just kind of click on in him, it made the theater professor in me so happy. This is my favorite movie of the year, and I'm glad it's not a big action blockbuster. I'm glad it's something that hasn't received a lot of publicity out there. This feels very special. This feels very small. This feels very independent. Now, that being said, when it comes to the nominees for Best Picture next year, they haven't been announced yet as of this recording. But, you know, if Ghostlight's not on there, that entire Best Picture list is just going to be null and void because this movie's not there. This movie is very special, and I've recommended it to everyone who asks me what my favorite movie of the year is. I can't say enough good things about this film. This film touched me here and here. I've been saying it all review, but really stuck with me here because the power of theater and how it can help you move through life and experience life and understand life. I mean, that's art. That's what we do here when it comes to movies, plays, novels, anything. That's what we do here. And that is my list of the best movies that have come out in 2024. What did you think of my list? What is your ranking of all the films that have come out in 2024? What are your favorites? Whatever you thought, comment below. Let me know what you thought about it. And as always, if you like what you see here, if you like my take on movies, then hit the subscribe button and make sure you hit that bell. See you the next time I'm releasing next movie review. So guys, I will see you next time on the channel. But in the meantime, be well, be good to each other, and go watch a movie. Take care, guys.